Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Conscious Health podcast with my co-host, David Ortega. He's on this side of my screen. I hope I've gotten you. And today we have this beautiful guest called Amy Lanci, and I'm going to quickly read her bio, and then we're going to get stuck into her story and find out more about who she is. And today's episode is titled, What Story Do You Want to Pass On to the Next Generation? Which I absolutely love. So Amy Lanci is a brand story coach, speaker, founder of Untold Story Enterprises, where she helps purpose-driven entrepreneurs and professionals transform their lived experiences into powerful narratives that heal, connect, and lead in their branding, their marketing, and their published works. She has helped over 100 companies, spoken on over 100 stages, and is the author of 3 books. So find them. They're called Listen Up, The Email Communication Bible, and The Voice Within, each offering a unique lens on expression, clarity, and reclaiming your voice. I absolutely love all of these themes. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how this beautiful passion purpose has been birthed.
Oh my gosh. I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it, because life is not linear, but yet we have to tell a story that way. And so when I look back, as now that, I'm a speaker and consultant and coach, and I deal with words and book publishing, it's really, life has come full circle, because I started off as a speech delayed child. And I was hiding underneath tables. I was extremely shy. I was extremely sensitive. So I was also very empathic. And, to go from hiding underneath tables to going through this journey of, learning who I was. At some point, I had emotional eating issues, which led to some health issues. And, at the same time, I found love at this point. I found the man who's now my husband. And so, having to, have that incentive to really work on myself, because I wanted to have a long, beautiful life with him. It was a physical health journey, but it was also an emotional, spiritual journey to understand who I really was. Not that I was just a shy person who, happened to get straight A's later on in life, and then, worked in marine biology, but just that, there was so much more to me, that I was a listener and people loved to share their stories with me. And I love telling stories. I love writing stories. There was always so much more to unpack there. And then that really led me to go into entrepreneurship, and eventually, go into the writing and communication space. Mm-hmm. And I just found that when I went more and more into this journey, that stories have been so important. That was the thing that people were hiring me for, to consult or to provide a done-for-you service, to help write their stories for the stage or on their website. Mm-hmm. And then also there were just people in grocery stores and the airports who were telling me their life story after meeting me for 5 minutes. And then also when I look back, my grandfather really loved telling us stories about his childhood, or just growing up in America after coming from China. It made me so proud to be second generation Chinese American. And my dad's also a storyteller. My mom is too, and my sister is to some extent. We're all kind of storytellers. And what I really love about what I have been doing lately, which is doing a lot more family memoir work with families and individuals who want to gather those stories from the past, is that there's a lot of healing that happens. And and so they're able to just kind of see what they do and do not want to pass on to the next generation. And just I've done that for myself and my daughter too. I'm thinking about things that I've wanted to pass on to her, and things that I've not wanted to pass on to her. Such as maybe some things, negative experiences from the past or habits from the past. And then thinking about, how do I break this cycle? And then help her through it. So yeah, I just feel like stories allow us to learn things and to see patterns in a way where it just brings it all together.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Sorry, that that I just jump in, but I was just lured by this storytelling that you were doing right now, and also reminded me a lot of these cycles that you mentioned that we really, I think this is, well, this is one of the purpose, because I think we have many purposes here, but one of the purposes that we have is that we need to understand these cycles and how to break them, and how
Mm-hmm.
we can heal these generations, because as we heal one, we heal seven. No, we impact
Yes.
seven,
Yeah.
and that's just the biology that nowadays we also know that biologically and epigenetically, that's the impact that we have. If we heal ourselves, if we deplete them of these epigenetic marks, which are bad habits, we
Mm-hmm.
really clean them to the level that we can impact seven more generations. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be just amazing if we just have this kind of training, probably, into
Mm-hmm.
understanding our own stories, and also accepting that we can't change the past, the things that
Mm-hmm.
the previous generations did, but
Yeah.
we can understand why they did it, or why they
Yes.
acted in that way, because of course the circumstances were completely different in many
Yes.
cases, and
Mm-hmm.
we are not here to judge them, but we are here to just witness or try to understand what happened with them, no? And by doing that, I think that we heal such a big part of our own journey, no?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You kind of reminded me about how I shared a story in a presentation recently that David was actually at. How I have had previous generations in my family favor the boys, and that's when you think about it, that's from a cultural perspective. Thinking about the boys who are the ones who are passing on the name and the ones taking care of the elderly parents later on in life. So they were favored, which left a lot of the girls feeling like secondhand. And that definitely happened in my family. And just thinking about how my mom, she ended up having two girls, myself and my sister. And so it was in that like such an interesting way to kind of break through that curse of like having just girls yourself, and having to show up my sister and I what my mom would have wanted to experience, because she had a brother who was favored over her. Like that was like, I didn't realize that till I got older, that how much of a gift that was, to be able to have that opportunity to break through that curse. And then to also think about when you're the older generation and you're coming from the mother country, you do have the cultural aspect, and then you have to adjust to a new life in a new world, and having to figure out how do you still have a stronghold in your mother culture while you are integrating yourself in a completely new culture of itself, and trying to make what you have, just figure out what you have in the first place. And so I just kind of imagine previous generations of my family, even though like even though they knew they were going to be in America for the rest of their lives, probably, they were still trying to hold on what they could of the Chinese culture. And so, I think at that point, it's hard to pick and choose what you choose to pass on. I think it wasn't until my mother and my father's generation that like they realized like, oh, I don't have to pass on all of the cultural norms from the Chinese culture. Like I think sometimes we don't understand what we want to pass on and what we don't want to pass on until like a generation later.
Yeah, and I so much to unpack there. Like there's so much. Like, yeah, that's beautiful. And I love this conversation because I work a lot with the Akashic records, and I work a lot on the ancestral side
Ooh,
of
yeah.
and looking at why we choose our families, to correct those or to enhance those traits. And we pick them because they are the perfect parents for what we need to experience and the themes that we're here to experience as well, and to
Mm-hmm.
change. And it's absolutely beautiful because if you look at it from an energetic perspective, how we've come very much like through the age of Piscean age, which is very much a masculine patriarchal age, which is why that was put into place to bring in those foundations. But I mean, the pendulum, I believe, always swings way too far.
Right.
And now we're focusing on bringing in kind of like that whole divine feminine energy within us as well, where, and it's amazing because your mom had 2 girls, I have 2 girls, and we're bringing in this beautiful rising of David has a girl as well. We're all like surrounded by,
and I have a girl.
And you have a girl. So the wonderful world of girls. It's beautiful. But I know definitely that when I was pregnant with my eldest, and I've always been a tomboy, I started to really step into my feminine side. And it's quite interesting because it birthed it in a different way. And I think we're moving into this aspect of really what is that divine feminine within, whether you're male or female, right? And bringing that nurturing acid side of us, which is absolutely beautiful. But the thing is the genetics, and I love that, purpose. I always say purpose is a windy road. And like David said, one of the purposes we're here to do is to discover who we are in this world by, we place all these conditionings like jackets, and then we start to peel them off and decide, see who are we, revealing who we are underneath. And I love that you've got storytelling, that we're bringing that back in again, because that is important. Because not only is it important to understand where we've come from, but you speak about voice, but the vibrational frequency of listening to your ancestors and telling the story with that emotion and behind it, helps us to understand. And it's absolutely beautiful, because I tell my clients, especially if their parents are close to transitioning, like, record their stories, because that will go on for the generations that are here to come, which is absolutely beautiful. But then you have that anchor. And the other thing that I love about your story is, yes, we cannot change the past, as David said, but we can look at how it worked for us and rewrite our story, because we've chosen it for a reason, because it's marked us, it's made us who we are today, it's made us resilient, it's made us overcome it, it's whatever it's done for us has actually been a complete gift. And I think looking at it as a gift in that sense is incredible, because and it's hard to, and we're making the changes ourselves. And I definitely see my limitations and my gifts within my children as well. So it's like, how do we change that? Right. And how do you change that for your daughter or our daughters? What are your suggestions?
What are my suggestions? Well, just to kind of give some context. So I mentioned in the beginning of the story how I was a very empathic, highly sensitive child and high need tables. And so I had noticed that my daughter was also highly empathic, and she wasn't high need tables, but I could tell that ever since she came out of the womb, she's been like clung to me ever since. But she's so much more confident and more social than I ever was at her age. And I think it's because I knew that about myself, and therefore I knew that about her. And so, when I talk about parenting and being around her and how do I nurture her in that way, it's not so much I follow any specific principle like gentle parenting or positive parenting. It's more like I look at, what did I really need as a child when I was upset or when I was reactive? What did I need then? And I give it to her. Like, it's asking me what, it's like I'm able to look at the past as like a recipe book almost, and also as a manual of what to do, what not to do. And I think my parents did the best they could, but they, in my culture, we've emphasized more like action and not so much, affection. And so, wow, I didn't mean to for that alliteration, but yeah, more action and less affection. So that meant that, like, it was more about keep moving forward as opposed to like acknowledging the emotions happening. And I feel like now that I'm a parent, I'm able to help her acknowledge how she's feeling and validate it. And then we're able to talk about how to move forward from here.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. No, I agree with that. Like I've started for me, I've started, if I notice a pattern or a conditioning that I didn't realize it was subconscious that became conscious, because my girls are a little bit older now, like 17 and 14, and they're both so different from each other as well. And they tackle things in a different way too, right? So I'm like, oh my God, I've just discovered that I have this pattern, that I've been doing this all my life. Where do you see it in your life? And how do we shift that together as a team? And I'm quite lucky because my mom lives with me. And Portuguese culture is very much the same way, right? So here we have like 3 generations that we're working through, and we're just like, okay. So I've seen it because my mom did it with her sister and her mother, because my grandmother lived with me. So I've been very grateful and very lucky to have that generation as well. So I'm like, how do we shift this? So here's 3 or 4 generations in one place. How do we shift this? Like now, how do we tackle this? Because we all come at it from different angles, but it's like, let's not ingrain this anymore into our system. Let's not continue to enforce these neural pathways, these stories, these limitations. And how do we do it in a more conscious way? And it might not even be the right way, but it's a different way that we're tackling, which will change things anyway.
Exactly. And I think the most important question, or the most important point here, is knowing that, we can't always change how people will behave, or
No.
but what we can do is look at what we can do moving forward. And sometimes it's a matter of having a conversation with the younger generation. Sometimes it involves a conversation with the older generation, and sometimes it just means like I take a moment to myself to think about the things that I wish were different, or the things that I would like to move forward with. And sometimes that's enough to just somehow change things. I don't know. I feel like there are times when I have thought about, things that I would like to improve with my parents or with my other relatives. And somehow, like when I look at that and think about like what that would heal within me, sometimes they approach me on their own, or sometimes the answer comes and smacks me in the face, and it's so much easier than I think it's going to be. And sometimes like just change happens over time without me realizing it, and all I'm doing is working on myself. So it's kind of like, it all stems from us, right? It's just a matter of like, is it active or is it passive?
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah.
And it's just so interesting how each family in each part of the world is 4 or 5 different stories, and they overlap in many ways also, because the patterns, the struggles, sometimes they are very similar, even though we are separated by many things. We sometimes realize that the problems that everyone has, we also have it, and we also struggle with these kind of let's say obstacles that life give us to overcome our limitations, as Natasha was saying. And we see it in our children, so like a mirror, that we can't turn away from that. We really are reflected in that way, and the story has to come out, and we have to work with that story. Otherwise, I think what happens is, and I was listening to a Spanish researcher that was talking about how this healing process should begin earlier for everyone, because if we heal children, if we give them these kind of tools that they learn to regulate their own emotions, understand their own emotions, and understand why they feel certain way or react in a certain way, we could really change a lot, because we will be having this subject, let's say, for the elementary school, then high school, and then the other places, and we would be so healthy that we would recognize damage, and we would recognize things, and we would create boundaries much earlier. And we would replicate this model with other people. So, she was explaining why we have so much turmoil or polarization in so many parts of the world. And she said that as we are really damaged many times, and we don't take time into this healing process, we damage other people. And that's the replicative model of what we are doing. So we are
Right.
replicating pain, we are replicating these patterns, and we are replicating this damage in other
Right.
people. But if we were responsible to heal, then the story would be completely different. No?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's kind of like what they say, like hurt people hurt people.
Hurt
Right.
people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then the opposite is true. It was like healed people heal people. Um, so and it's so true. It's so true. I think that it comes down to that awareness and that willingness to take responsibility and accountability for ourselves. I think that, what has helped me is like understanding like how much, I don't say I'm in control, because it's not about control. It's about how much choice I have when it comes to what I do from here to move forward. And I think that based on my actions and then my willingness to say I'm sorry when it's necessary. I think it keeps me very honest, and I think that it helps me to accept the reality and the truth of what's happening in front of me and what action I need to take. So I think if we all kind of look at ourselves as a mirror, if my child looks at me as a mirror, if I'm looking at her as a mirror, then it's like then I get to lead by example, and then she gets to demonstrate that, and then we get to have this nice little feedback loop of like, this is how we're healing together, and going around this life. So yeah, I think the world, if you think about like if we all took the opportunity to take responsibility and accountability for what we choose to do in this lifetime that could impact the other lifetimes after this, and other generations, think about how the world would be different. The world would be so much better for it.
Yeah.
I completely agree in that sense of where do we take responsibility, because I also believe that we're constantly creating the world around us and the situations around us. So how are they working for us, right? Because it's very easy to say, oh, it's so-and-so's fault. You made me do this. No, we choose how we feel towards it. And we choose how we respond to it. But I think that takes a level of courage to start taking that responsibility for, okay, why I'm benefiting from the situation that I've created or that is here. Why am I? Or like, what is the lesson? Or how can I change this? How can I respond? But it's like you say, it's almost kind of like we choose how we respond to it. We choose what it makes it mean. We choose all of this. And I think that from a place of curiosity, it's kind of like, oh, why is this showing up for me? What's it come to show me about myself and the future generations? And I 100% agree. We can't control other people, nor should we want to. Do the thing that's detrimental to their soul, their life purpose, to their understandings. And I think as a lot as empaths and as healers, because a lot of people that are listening to this will be healers, we want to fix everything. And I did as well. Part of my journey, I wanted to fix everybody. I wanted to take away the pain, but I've started to realize now that I've started working more in this as well, is honoring people's journey and really walking beside them. And it is, you're right, we're only really responsible for how we change, and controlling, how we, because we're always in control, even when we feel out of control, we're allowing that, right? So it's absolutely beautiful from that sense. That, yeah, I totally agree. It's the choices, it's how we respond, but it's the hard work happens at the beginning when we start dialing internally and saying, okay, what is happening internally? Because then that takes some courage to really, really look at, okay, what have I been doing? Why have I been doing this? And it's been subconscious. And I think once we realize the patterns or the limitations, to continue doing that would be a conscious choice. Then it's a choice, right? And we can't get away from karma. So action reaction, right? And I just see it as an opportunities for us to work through things. And sometimes I believe that when we resist something, it will continue to show up for us in different capacities as well. So it's beautiful in the sense of kind of like choosing it and moving with it. I think is a faster, easier, more expansive way to move through it, but feel those feelings 100%. It's not about bypassing anything, but
Yeah.
sitting with it for a little bit and then moving on. I don't know how you feel about that.
It's not about, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think that anytime we try to bypass something, it doesn't, it's not the way to go. But I do
No.
think that we don't necessarily, I think that we need to acknowledge it and then make sure that we don't stay there. I think that's
Yes.
really what it is, right? It's like there's a difference between bypassing and then like I acknowledge this finally and then I move forward, right? It's
Absolutely.
yeah. So I do feel I do agree with you with that, and I think that I think that what I'm really hearing from you is that courage is probably the first step before self-awareness, because you have to be brave enough to look at the darkness inside in order to be willing to practice that muscle of self-awareness. And I think that's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's worth it when you get through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really a manual to do that. You just
No.
just do it. You just do it, but you do it with you. I think the thing is you don't have to do it alone. I think that's what it is. You could do it alone, but you don't have to do all of it alone.
No.
So, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
All of this conversation is just reminding me of this work that I'm also doing with myself and sharing my story with a therapist. And by sharing this process of developing my own story with her and going into the stages and why I suffered certain things in when I was a child, when I was entering into the teenage years and all of those things, we were reflecting that the kind of parents that I have are the opposite in a way that they can reflect things of, let's say, not one of them, my father. Sometimes I feel that he is many times not taking responsibility for his actions, and he looks for someone to blame or something to blame. And my mother is not like that. It's the opposite. So I have these two sides, and I have had since when I was a child a huge, let's say, amount of responsibility for them and for myself and for my brother. Then my therapist asked the question, well, where do you stand? You have these two sides, but where are you and who do you want to become in this process? And I said, well, it's funny that you ask that because right now what I want to do is release the control and get rid of some of that responsibility because I feel overwhelmed many times. And I think I have taken the side of my mom of being too responsible and too focused on those things and controlling everything. And I need to release a little bit of that and just let people do what they want with their own lives. And as you mentioned, we are healers and we try to heal people because we want them to feel like us, or we want things to be easy sometimes as we were as it was for us. So that's what we are here to learn. So these stories just reflect the sides, why you pick this family, why you pick this kind of parents. And then the question is to you. So where are you? No?
Oh yeah. And I think that I think about the healers, right? In ourselves. And also I think that when you take the courage and self-awareness to look at our own story, we realize that at least for me, I realized there are healers in my family too. I've seen how they've had an extremely hard life because they thought they could fix everyone, they could save everyone, and I take the opportunity to learn from watching them. And I also like take responsibility for just what can I do to set boundaries for my own sanity, but then also just like also answer that call of like helping the higher good. It's a balance, right? It's a really big balance of like figuring out, what do I need to do for myself versus how can I help others in the situation, or just help others in general. I think about my mom, who she is such a giving person, and I think about how it's been hard sometimes, because I know that she's tried to help so many people, and there were people in the family who didn't appreciate it, and I know that she lives with that too today, and I do my best. I do my best as her daughter to let her know like how much we appreciate her. But I also know like there's only so much I can do to remind her, because I'll never be those voices in her head. But I at least can like take my voice out of the picture that could be out of the picture story in her head that could be circulating in there, because she has given so much to certain members of the family, and I think that if I could do my part to show her how much I appreciate her, and then also like kind of set my own boundaries in terms of like understanding there's only so much I can do to try to help her, but then also there's only so much there is some stuff I can do, such that like I show her how much I love her, I thank her, I also include her in parts of my life, and also I bring my daughter into the mix to like show her how do she show appreciation to her grandmother in a way that doesn't feel forced. So I think that I think that when it comes to ourselves as healers, it's an interesting journey. It's an interesting journey, because we are here to help others, but then we also can't forget ourselves in the mix. Yeah.
I think that's the two sides of the coin, right? Is kind of like, so sometimes by focusing on others, we totally end up ignoring ourselves, because sometimes it's hard to look at ourselves as well. I noticed that with a lot of my clients during COVID, where they weren't able to, especially those that were busy constantly doing this, that and the next thing, and driving kids and helping this one and helping that one, that they were stuck with just themselves. And that was quite a scary place to look internally, right? And it's kind of like there's nowhere else to go but to sit with you, kind of a thing. And I think that's why it's such a good, like, these silent retreats, or these places where you can just go and sit and journal and really, really, unplug from everything else is absolutely important. And I know with the work that I do, and like sometimes I'm like, I just need to disconnect my energy from everything and everyone and just be me, in order for that guidance to open up as well, right? And it's like, we're so used to being busy, like your dad was saying, that action. It was so beautiful when you're talking about that, and looking at the patriarchal, the masculine energy is about doing, the feminine energy is about nurturing and being, where you're actually able to slow down to nurture and say, hey, what am I feeling? Which is, I think, why we're going very much into that era now in society, right? And it's beautiful to notice that, as well, in the sense that in order to survive in those times of our parents and our grandparents, we actually had to shut off that heart aspect in order to survive and provide and protect our families, right? Because it was dangerous to have that. So now I think we spend a whole generation of undoing that, in a sense of not undoing that. It's the looking at it and healing it and expressing it and releasing it. Because I also do a lot of somatic work as well, because it gets, the body keeps the score, right? And we pass that on. So it's almost kind of like looking at it from that perspective, going, okay, I can heal it now. I can change the pattern for the generations to come. I can release it. Right. And I believe part of it is because we've chosen it. We've chosen these parents. We've chosen these limitations, these challenges, because it's, I mean, in another sense, like we try and make things easier for the generations after us, but they will still find trauma. It's because it's in that shadow aspect that we grow. I mean, I don't think anybody escapes this planet without experiencing darkness, because it's part of that growth part. But it's like you say, it's grabbing those tools that support us, and each of us are different, right, for that. But that understanding of it, I think sometimes just by knowing the why. So like David, just by knowing, like you knowing your parents, like this is one parent, this is the other. Why? Because I've come to learn that somewhere in the middle is the right path between the two of them. And how do I become into that is just like, it's kind of like a beautiful journey when you start looking at that soul's blueprint to bring that in, plus what's happening on a collective, on a planet, or in a country even. So you're talking also, oh God, there's so much that I can unpack. I think we're going to need a few of these sessions. Like, it's beautiful in the sense that, like, you're talking about being, Chinese American, and that in itself, those frequencies, it's like looking at how do we celebrate that. What does it mean, to bring in that knowledge, that ancient knowledge and wisdom, and medicine into, a very, very new world, which is a state where anything is possible. And you hold those two frequencies, and how do you merge them and, expand them into this, like, I have this ancient knowledge and wisdom that I carry for generations, and now I'm in the land of all possibilities. Like, how do I merge these two, and expansive and express them, which you're on stage and you're helping hundreds of people with things like that. So that purpose starts to kind of like fall into place, which is beautiful to witness.
When you were talking about the two frequencies, you suddenly made me think about my grandmother's juk, which is, a lot of people know it as konji, but we call it juk in my family, because in our dialect is juk. And my grandmother would put things like ginkgo nuts and like goji berries and like a variety of different like things in there that I just ate because she cooked it and she gave it to me. And then it wasn't until as she got older and I got older that I realized, like, oh, she was actually putting medicine into our into our food. I didn't even realize it. And that's because and I think it's because of that. That's why she's still alive. She's 96, and she has had a couple of smaller health issues, but all things considering, she's healthier than some other relatives who are like 20 years younger than her. And it's like, dang, this woman just keeps going. Like, it's like it's just and it's like that ancient knowledge of just like bringing it in from the mother country and then putting it in like a normal everyday food, and realizing later, like, oh, that was really powerful. I had no idea she was doing that for us. And then my mother also was doing the same thing, because she didn't even think about it was medicinal herbs. She was just thinking like, oh, that's what my mom, my grandmother's, her mother, was putting into her juk also. So it's just like, it is that interesting mix of bringing in the ancient wisdom, but then like somehow figuring out how to make this American life. It's and it looks different for every person in the family. But yeah, it's just I think that it makes such an interesting story later on, because I'm sure that like some people just don't put anything in their juk, and then here like my family's like, ooh, okay, we'll put this ginkgo nut in. Like I had no idea goji berries was something that people put into smoothie bowls or whatever. I just saw it in my juk. Like I didn't even know it was a sweet thing. It just kind of added to the savory flavor, like to savoriness of everything that was in there. And it's just so interesting how like, I tell people like, I saw this in soups. I did not see this as like a cold food for the longest time. I never saw it as a super food. It was just there. So I just think I think that's the difference between like passing something on as ancient knowledge versus something that's trendy. Because it was a way of preserving what we learned, what my grandmother and other people have learned, and also just being in the diaspora, where like in downtown LA and Chinatown, like just having, there were some established Chinese herbalists that did come over. And so that did help a lot to like still have someone to go to that knew this ancient knowledge too. So it's just really, it's really fascinating to me to just kind of see what people's stories are when they had to go from one country to another and what they had to do and what is still alive today. And you're right, it's about celebrating what that is. Because I know there's a lot of every family has dysfunction and trauma and negative experiences of some kind. Like no family is no family has a blank slate. If someone says that, I'm like, you are the biggest liar ever, because every family, despite how close they are, has had something happen in the past, right? Like, or several things, most likely. But I think that like what I have found is with working with my own family and also my clients with their family memoirs is that, you know, if they have that space to just tell it like it is, they're more open to seeing what there is to celebrate, as opposed to, I gotta live through the pain again. It's like, no, I'm not asking you to live through the pain. I'm not asking you to live through the pain. I'm just asking you to, you know, say it like it is right now. We have that safe space with me, and then we can figure out what you want to add to the memoir, what you want to add to this story. How do you want people to remember your family by, you know? And it's easier to get to that point of celebration than to like be like, oh, just pretend this bad thing never happened. It's like, well, no. We can acknowledge that this happened, but just in the space between us, we don't have to put that in the story if you don't want to. You can still mention it if you want to, but I'm going to leave that choice to you. And I think that when I give them that little bridge, it's easier for them to cross it to the other side to find that point of celebration.
So. Well, it's just so complicated to share those painful moments, and many times people feel vulnerable.
Yeah,
and I think that's what is coming now in these frequencies that we are talking about. I think the frequency that we see many times in these social platforms is showing up that your life is perfect. I think more now is changing, is shifting into a reality check, and people are just sharing more and more what is really happening with them, and the struggles, because they connect more with people, and they don't just show up as fake, because as you mentioned, anyone that says that doesn't have any emotional trauma, it's just a liar, because we all have these kind of things. The other thing that can happen is that you hide it so well, and you want to show up as a healthier version of you. That's not real, and that's just let's say building up the toxicity inside of, because you are repressing still that shadow part of you that needs to come up to the light until you heal. No.
Oh my gosh, I can like just write a whole book about that. How, just to pretend something isn't there, it doesn't mean it's not there. And it's just gonna, you know what it is that the more it goes unaddressed, the worse it gets. It's gonna show up in some other way. It won't seem like it's related, but it is. It's gonna be some kind of habit, some kind of addiction, or some kind of reaction to some kind of trigger that people are gonna just have no idea what to do with. And then that's gonna be passed on to the next generation, and they're gonna be wondering like, I don't know where this is stemming from, and I don't know why I have this trigger also. And so, yeah, I agree is that, that toxicity just builds up. And then before you know it, it's being passed down. And then the next few generations are having to pick up the pieces, not knowing what to do about it because it wasn't theirs in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean? If you just ignore it for long enough, doesn't it go away?
It's not like the
Like
dust
la
that
la
you
la
put.
la la la.
Yes, it's just
No,
so.
it's true, and it actually shows up, I think, genetically. I think
Yeah.
David will be able to talk more about that. Like, if you look at, people that have gone through wars and holocausts and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff, the generations afterwards, I think, are more prone to being stressed and anxiety and all sorts of things like that as well. I don't think we get away from it. I think it's like, I say children are our biggest teachers because they feel their feelings 100% and then they forget about it. They're like, you ask them 5 minutes later, they're best
Yeah.
buddies with the person that hurt them, but they had their tiff and they had that experience. And,
Mm-hmm.
and somewhere along the line, I don't know where, but we start to forget how to do that, or we start to control that. We start to suppress that, which is so interesting from that perspective.
And talking about this science part that you mentioned, that it
Mm-hmm.
it gets hold into our genetics. I was also watching a documentary where they were figuring out how people heal by themselves without
Mm-hmm.
these drugs or medications or things like that, and how people that are just being removed from cancer and they take away the tumor and they take away all the cells that they have cancer, and a couple of years later or even before the year, cancer comes back again. So they say the question is why they remove all the physical things that were there supposedly, uh, let's say, it's not infected, but let's say with cancer or with this process disrupted,
Yeah.
why do they come back if they
Mm-hmm.
are not there? So that means that it's not physical. That means that it has something else behind that is driving this force into disrupting the system again and creating the cancer again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the emotional circle that we are live on when
Yeah.
we repress those emotions. They need to find an outlet.
Yeah.
Sometimes they you can have a part, let's say, I will make the analogy and it's completely simple, but it's not like that in the
Mm-hmm.
cellular space. But if you have a fruit and
Mm-hmm.
part of the fruit has been ripped so much that
Mm-hmm.
it has a fungus or it has something there, and you just remove the part and eat the whole fruit,
Mm-hmm.
nothing will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave this fruit with the rib part and the fungi and
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
in a matter of one day or less than one day, the
Mm-hmm.
complete fruit is going to be, let's say, infected with this fungi
Yeah.
in all the
Mm-hmm.
parts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what happens inside of us. We
Mm-hmm.
leave one part that is not healed,
Mm-hmm.
it tends to keep replicating
Mm-hmm.
disruption.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that like I know we've been talking about girls a lot, but isn't that like when a female embryo is inside their mother, they have the egg inside of them that would someday be the grandchild, right? Like when I was in my mother's womb, the egg that was inside of me at the time will have experienced my mother's experiences, and that is my daughter today. So it's so fascinating how yeah, just even that can impact two generations at once. And I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I read a study, this was a long time ago, and I don't remember which study it was, that they found through records that women who were pregnant during wartime and they gave birth to babies who were skinnier, like I think later on, those babies end up having more metabolic issues moving forward in life versus like a a pregnant woman who lived during a time when it was prosperous and it was a peaceful time, and she would have a baby and that baby would generally have like an easier an easier life in terms of like health. And I think that it was the difference between like the wartime baby would have more like a scarcity mindset of like trying to always make sure there was always food on the table versus like the baby that was more creative and because their mother was happened to be pregnant during a time of peace. And I need to go find that study again, but I think that there was like some kind of assessment, some kind of evaluation when they looked at just birth weights of babies and mothers during the different times they were pregnant. And I think that's the epigenetics of how we can be impacted. But when we look at generational perspective, it's like, well, you know, if my grandmother was, when she came on a boat from China, you know, like I felt, you know, I probably got that impact in some way genetically, like, you know, in my life. I don't know how that shows up, but I'm sure it shows up in some way. It's fascinating. It's also, you know, really upsetting when I think about some stuff that previous generations had to endure, but it's also like very empowering too to move forward. So I love your metaphor about the fruit and, you know, not cutting out the fungus, because that's really what we're doing. We're kind of removing the thing we don't need to pass on. So that way, you know, we can all have more abundance and a bountiful harvest later on.
Yeah. And it is true that study happened, and that study was investigated, and I think that's one of the first studies that show up these epigenetic phenomena that show up in the metabolism of people years later, and like 3 or 4 generations later. They started to figure out what happened with this kind of children that were now having problems of obesity, diabetes, and all of these things. And they say, why, if they were coming from these generations that were supposedly healthier, because they were skinny, but skinny doesn't mean you are healthy. That's a fiction tale. So that's what we are understanding now, that is beyond the physicality that these processes happen. So it's
absolutely.
Amy, I was wondering if we could switch gears, because I also have a marketing background, and I from an Akashics perspective, I also look at, I mean, you are your brand, but that's something you mentioned in, you know, translating this all into branding and marketing. How do you do that?
Some of it is getting a better understanding of your expert authority on a personal level, and then some of it is also figuring out how do you find the words to translate the expert authority to your target audience. So for instance, you know, it's not enough to take my resume and put it into a paragraph format. You know, it's one thing to kind of turn some heads and show that I'm credible, but to show the target audience, you know, that you truly understand the problem is like when you can tell the story in a way that they see themselves in it. And then also you're using language that they're saying to themselves in the closet. Like, you know, for instance, if let's say I had a client that helped women to lose weight, right? Like, let's say that was my client and they had gone through their own weight loss journey on their own. It's not enough for them. I mean, they can just say, you know, I lost this amount of weight in this amount of time. But they would then sound like everyone else. But if they were to kind of go back in their story to think about, you know, when they had a sensitive moment where, you know, something happened and they went to emotionally eat, or when they would hide their snacks in the closet or whatever, like, you know, when they think about the thoughts they had in their heads, what they were saying to themselves when they were, you know, every time they looked past the mirror, when they put those quotes in from their mind, what they said in the past into their story, it makes it so much more relatable and easier for their audience to connect, because their audience like, oh my gosh, I said the exact same thing, you know, or I did the exact same thing, or this person understands us in a way that, you know, other people don't. And so, yeah, it's really just about getting the client to understand, why they're the expert in all of this, to show in their story what led them up to this journey, and then to also like say that in the audience's words. That's how I translate all of it into branding and marketing.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's just about it's you know what it is. It's just about empathy on a deeper level brought to the marketing space. That's really what it is.
Yeah,
that's really what it is, and it's about embracing.
Yeah, and again, it's translating and getting to know who you are and what your limitations are and what you faced and the courage it took to face it and how you overcame it and the discipline to do it. So yeah, no, absolutely love that for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And then that's why I tell people, I went from speech delay to now I'm speaking and I'm consulting, which is like the opposite of what you would expect, but it just kind of gives people a little snippet of just the journey I had to go on to get here. So I think that as long as we keep that in mind, we'll always remember this is a quote that I've coined, is that, resume shows you're qualified, but your story shows you're the expert.
I love that. That's a beautiful way of putting that.
Thank you. So thank you for asking me about the branding and marketing space. Yes, it all relates. I think it's all several paths that lead to the same thing, which is you. Yeah. It's just a matter of how do you tell, what story do you tell, and how do you tell it, and to who?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Amy. And to wrap up this whole information, and of course we need a second episode, a second part of
gosh, I would love that. Yes.
So that we can talk deeper into these kind of stories, and probably you can share, without names and without things, just the pieces of stories that you have helped to assemble in your clients. What can you tell people about their own story and how to share it better, or what they can learn from that?
Okay, well, first of all, they have to acknowledge that there is a story they can share. I've met so many people that say, I don't really have a story, or I don't know what my story is. And then I'm like, well, you do have a story. Rest assured, everyone has that. So just process that. And then the other part of it is that, when they are looking at their story, first it's about them having to figure out, look at all the pieces on the table. I think it's very tempting to put your story into a formula that works for other people. But then, if you're trying to put something into a formula before you see everything, you end up cherry picking without realizing it. And then you're cherry picking your entire story. And then you have something that doesn't feel right. So I say, look at all the different pieces and ask yourself some questions that may seem unrelated, but they actually are. One time a friend asked me, Amy, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a child? And that was such a profound question, because my answer to her was, I wanted to be an archaeologist, and I wanted to be a screenwriter. And so here I am excavating people's stories. So it's just probably one of the most insightful moments of my life when she asked me that. And it's such a simple question, because if we can look at, just something like, what did we want to do when we were kids? And how does that relate to us now? That's amazing. So when you think about those kind of questions and asking yourself that will help you find a puzzle piece to put into your story. And I think that to be able to look at the recurring themes and how everything connects together, I think that's the biggest thing. And then from there, once you've done all that, then you can work on delivery, which is all about having the beginning, middle, and end, which is the more linear aspect of talking about your story to people. But I tell people, hold off on that until you put everything on the table, because you're going to miss something that you would have otherwise passed up. It's like seeing a movie for the second or third time. You're going to notice that there were little hints here and there that something was going to happen before it actually did. So I think that we all need to look at our story as a movie we need to see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times when we're ready to see it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Amy, and
Mhm.
thank you, everyone, for listening. Of course, we encourage your questions. And of course, if you want to share your story or if you think you don't have a story, contact
Mhm.
Amy. Where can people find you, Amy? By the
They
way,
can go to my website, untoldstory.enterprises.com. Just one story, untoldstory.enterprises.com, or they can email me at amy@untoldstory.enterprises.com.
perfect. We will also link
Beautiful.
the episode.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.